So, are you a consultant or coach and you're trying to figure out how in the world do I package up like an extensive career, my experiences, and get it into messages and on a website and get it all done in less than 30 days without sacrificing quality and without over relying on AI? Well, you're definitely going to love this episode of the Consulting Matters podcast with my guest and client, Dorothy Mosby. And welcome to the Consulting Matters podcast. This is the show for purpose driven consultants and coaches who are ready to own the power of what they do and position themselves for the clients, the impact and income that they're ready for. I'm your host, Betsy Jordan, and I'm so excited to have Dorothy Mosby on the show today. So, Dorothy and I started working together a couple months ago. So, she was on a webinar and she's like, I need to work on my brand positioning, but only problem is I have a really important event and it's about 30 days from now. What can we do? How do we get this done? And I'm like, I've never gotten a website done. I haven't gotten brand positioning done and the website and everything done. I'm like, but I'm going to take this on because I think that Dorothy has so much to offer our clients and I wanted to make it a success. And we did it and we got her an amazing website. So you're going to hear all about her experience and what it's like to go from being an academic to a leadership coach and a business owner and all of that. And so, without further ado, let me just welcome Dorothy to the show. I'm so glad to have you here.
It is great to be with you, Betsy. Thank you.
So, I really am so grateful for the challenge that you put in front of me and my team because I don't think we've ever gone through. It's not even that we just got a website done. You weren't even 1,000% sure on your business direction when we started. And I'm just amazed that we were able to make that happen. And I love everything that, if for those who are watching, you get to see all of our brand colors are here. But before we get into the whole experience, like bring us back into your experience. So you're an academic leader and then you were in charge of a lot of different things. So bring us back to your career and the crossroads you were at before you and I started working together.
Yeah, thank you so much, Betsy. It's been quite a journey and it's been a really interesting one. I've been a faculty member for goodness, probably well over 25, probably close to 30 years now. And I've been in academic administration for the past 10 years. And so last year I stepped down from my position as a senior leader, as chief academic officer, and really thinking about, well, what's next for me? And I have all of this experience in academia, both as a faculty member and also as a senior leader, and a wealth of experience. Is like, what do I do with it? I still wanted to stay engaged in higher education, but wasn't quite sure where it was going to take me. And so I started doing some tiny experiments, doing some coaching, talking to some colleagues and friends about, well, what are you working on? And the thing that lit me up quite a bit was both the coaching aspiring leaders and people who are already in leadership, as well as mid career faculty. But also, when my colleagues were talking about the conflict that they were experiencing either on their teams or in different academic departments, that is what really lit me up. Just really
Huh.
wanting to help support them and help them navigate some situations that seem pretty intractable and knowing that I can make a difference in this space.
So when you were at that crossroads and you're trying to figure out like, okay, so I want to leave my job, what made you decide I want to do this for myself rather than going for a promotion, maybe in another school or university? Like what made you decide like I want to do my own thing? Was it that you really enjoyed the coaching and you started feeling passionate about the clients and the opportunities around conflict resolution? Or was there something else that was driving you to say, I want to do my own thing?
I think it was a combination of things. First, just sort of looking at the landscape of where higher education is. And I didn't feel like a lateral move was the right one for me. I've been there, I've done that. There are some challenges, but, nothing I haven't quite seen before. And the next step was to be president of a college. And that also to me didn't quite feel right, really, because I just wasn't ready to be quite external facing and public. I like doing the behind the scenes work quite a bit. And so neither of those seemed like the right choice for me. And really kind of looking at my values and what's important to me, I value my autonomy, my independence, being able to think freely, but also being able to do the work that I like to do. And so looking at coaching and consulting was really a pathway at that autonomy and independence.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's a little bit of both the freedom and the independence that you're talking about, but also it still represents more of a promotion for you. So the promotional path of going for a president role, like, yeah, that was an option, but it didn't appeal to you because of these other values around bringing that, having that more that freedom and that control. So it could provide it both sides. Is I can do my own thing my way, but I could do it in a more expanded version of what I've been doing. Take my experience to the next level.
Right. And also, Betsy, considering, I'm a woman of a certain age. I'm not quite ready for retirement yet. And, to also have the ability to create something of my own, to
Uh-huh.
be my own boss and take on the projects that were important to me and those things that I really wanted to take on, but also giving myself the time and the space to be able to do other things was also very attractive to me.
Yeah, so I that's what is something that I really love about being a business owner, is you do get to create like your own legacy, your own body of work. Like this is what I want it to be all about. And if you are moving into whatever phase of life you want to be, like when I started my business, my kids were little, so I wanted to be at home with them. Now I'm on the other side of it. And that does give you that freedom to make other kinds of life choices as well and to be able to kind of have your own this is how I wanna make a difference in the world.
Mhm. And another thing about midlife is also the responsibility of caregiving for
Uh-huh.
elderly family members. I also wanted to be able to do that without feeling the push pull pressure, as a senior leadership position does. And and now my mom is living at home, with us. And she's living a great life, and I'm glad to be able to provide that and also to have the time and space to spend with her.
That is the best part. Like, when you get to have control over your time, you get to fill it up with the things that are important and spending time with a parent who's getting older, like, that's hugely important. So it sounds like for you, a lot of it is I still wanna make a difference. I still want to contribute. I still wanna grow. I still need to provide for people in my life and myself included, and I also wanna have the freedom to run my life and make the impact that I wanna make in however it works best for me.
Right.
So, what were you struggling with before we met? So, you participated, I think, in like my live webinar that I did on the common good is when you and I first met. But what were you struggling with? So, it seems like you were really clear that I want to have my own business. You had some ideas of, I like helping leaders. I like helping mid-career people. I like dealing with conflicts. So, you had some ideas of areas that you wanted to work in. What were you struggling with that made you decide like, "Hey, I think I wanna take a next step and work together?"
For me, the consulting part was crystal clear. I knew it's conflict resolution, leadership development support, that was very clear. The coaching was a little bit more squishy, because I had in mind, my ideal coaching client and also experience with coaching people that weren't necessarily my ideal coaching client. But man, I really enjoyed those transformative conversations. And I think my struggle was trying to get everybody, in the same sort of bucket. And, I didn't want to give up anything. I didn't necessarily want to give up the mid career faculty in order to, position myself to support senior leaders. I didn't necessarily want to give up aspiring leaders because also that is where also some real transformative, coaching conversations, becomes really critical for someone who is thinking about stepping into a leadership position. And so I didn't want to give up any of those pieces. But the struggle was trying to find sort of that umbrella, to hold everyone.
So do you feel like you got the umbrella?
I didn't get actually I decided to let some pieces go, but also being open, if someone, so my focus, turned to senior leaders. But I also know that those senior leaders are the same people who are going to be supporting mid-career faculty and also aspiring leaders as well. And so, what I envisioned happening is out of those conversations with senior leaders about what I can provide, what I can offer, the support I can bring to themselves and their institutions, that they also would be willing to bring along others with them.
And I think that there was a through line though. So when we first started working together, it was like, okay, which direction do you want to go? Like we tried on a couple different features as we worked through the brand positioning, but really at the end of the day, like the through line really is academic leaders or leaders in academia. You're not dealing with leaders in any company, like you're not dealing with just anybody. We're dealing with leaders in higher ed, academia, and that was the environment. So that did provide some through line and then really good targeting at that point, like who's my most likely, most profitable particular client? Like, how do I get my messaging to speak to that person? But on the whole, we're still talking to academic leaders. And that was some degree of a through line. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. That also was very crystal clear to me that, I wanted to remain in the higher ed space. One is because it's the space that I know the best and the most, but it's also the space that in terms of my own values, that, that is where it is. I believe in education. I believe in the transformative, power of higher education and also just a deep desire to support the people who are doing the work to educate our future society and future generations.
So I don't normally get somebody from like because there was several different directions that we can go through to the level that we have an amazing website, launch ready, and we got it done, in time for your event. So talk to me a little bit about your event and what do you think? Like, what was the driver for the event that gave us that deadline? And how do you think that having that specific event really helped focus us through your brand positioning and messaging process, like
Mm.
knowing in advance, like, I need this website. Like, tell us about the event and why was it important for you to have a high quality website that accurately captured, what you wanted to do? Why was that important? What was the event? Why was it important? And how did having that defined time period really help give focus and energy for the project that we worked on together?
Well, the event was the HERS reunion and conference. And HERS is an organization of women higher ed leaders. I had gone through their Leadership Institute for training. And, this is a kind of a homecoming in a way. It was also my debut as a coach and as a consultant. So I was introducing or reintroducing myself to colleagues, not as Dorothy Mosby, Vice President for Academic Affairs, not as Dorothy Mosby, Dean of Faculty at X institution, but as Dorothy Mosby, coach and leadership consultant. And so what this did and my desire was, well, I want to have something to show. I want to have a business card, I want to have a website. I want to be able to demonstrate to people like not only am I saying this, but I also have, some representation, a website that I'm actually doing this. And I was also on 2 panels, that are very close to what I envision, coaching more on, and supporting more women around. And that is, I was on a panel talking about transitions. And so, being a leader of an institution or senior leader at an institution and transitioning either to a different role, different institution, or in my case, transitioning, into entrepreneurship, having my own coaching and consulting practice. And I was also on a panel about self care for women leaders in higher education, another topic that, is very near and dear to my heart, and also one that I coach around as well. And so, to be able to be on those two panels, engage in conversations with participants, and to be able to say, please visit my website. Let's have a conversation. Let's follow up. Here's my card, let's stay in touch, was really meaningful and important to me to have at that moment in time.
So some people would say, well, why would you need that? Like, you already had the panel that you were on, you already had the credibility, you had the networking. Like, why couldn't you just, you know, s- just go on Canva, print out any old business card? You don't need a website. Like some people would say that. What would you say to them? Like, what difference did it make for you to have something that was such a great representation of what you wanted it to be about, and your photos, everything looked amazing. Like, what difference did it make for you that you had it at that level?
I think Betsy really touched on it. It's about representation, right? When I represented myself as, part of an institution, I wanted to make sure that, my messaging is clear, the visual presentation is clear and understandable. And so I wanted to do the same thing for myself. Right. And so have a clear message, have a clear brand, something that was visual, something that represented me. And the same thing, thinking about the website, having that representation. One thing, Betsy, when we were talking about the website, you said, well, you need to get a branding photographer. I'm like, brand? I was just going to call my cousin down the street. um, he's a photographer, but you're like, no, you need someone who specializes in that. And I was really fortunate to find Lejeune King, who was a terrific branding photographer, made me feel comfortable. I felt like Oprah, during the photo shoot. And I feel like I have photos that represent who I am, warm, welcoming, but also very professional at the same time, dedicated to academia. And, to be able to put those images on a website that also, demonstrates that I am warm, approachable, very professional, highly competent. And, to have both of those together, having a clear message to get out into the world to tell people this is what I'm doing and this is who I am.
Well, I would have to say your photographer was amazing. As I looked through the folder of all the photos and we chose to go with a single page website for you, my heart broke. I'm like, how do I pick out of these pictures? And I sent it off to the team. I'm like, I don't know how you're going to do this. Like, do your best because they're all so good. And it's like, I can't leave any of these behind. Like, there was one I think you had it in a purple jacket that I don't know if we really got onto the website. I'm like,
Mhm.
but it's so good. There's so many pictures that are so good. And then it's like, I love the picture. Like, for those of you who are listening and you have the opportunity to head on over to her website, it's www.dorothymosby.com, I believe,
Yes.
is your URL, but there's, like, in the about picture, like, I just see it so clearly, like, there's a polka dot shirt that you have and your hair is up and you got the cute shoes on, but it's like, it's so friendly and so relatable, and I believe that that was a huge part of why the website came out as good as it did, is you did do that work to get the amazing photos, and it definitely showed. It definitely showed. How did it make you feel to see yourself reflected in that way? Like, I notice with a lot of my clients when we go through the photo shoot, especially when they get good photos. Like, when they have, like, a not great photographer, it's a bad thing. It's a very depressing experience, but when you have a good one, like, what do you how did it make you feel to see that mirroring back to you? And, like, what did it mean to you about, like, what it means that I'm, like, a legitimate business owner or something like that?
It was, and I hate to use the word because it gets used so often, but it was such an empowering experience.
Mhm.
Right, to be in a photo session, and like I said, I felt like Oprah, right? Doing her O magazine. It was empowering. I felt validated. I felt, that yes, I am going in the right direction, for myself. It just felt like things were just coming together. And to have such a stunning, representation of, both the work ethic, but also a certain level of elegance and
Mhm.
gravitas, in the photos as well. Just kudos to Lejeune King because she she really, did it right as a photographer, and also the experience of having a makeup artist
Uh-huh.
do the makeup for the website is or for the photos as well. I mean, again, just empowering. It's like, wow, like I don't need a facelift. I just need some good makeup, right?
Right?
You know, I just need a good concealer and we could just keep it moving. And so it was just such a beautiful experience. And I didn't know, what it was going to be like. And I'm so glad I did it. And again, it was so empowering.
The photos are really important of having the right person with the makeup and then somebody who could pose you. Like when I relaunched my website after I came out of sabbatical a couple of years ago, and I had one photographer who didn't pose me, and I don't like the outfits were not really me. And the output was like, oh my God, I look so old, like I look terrible. And my uh, podcast team who's editing this particular podcast, she was like, well, you might just have to, like, hear that song about, like, the story, like, these lines in my face tell you the story of where I've been, and I'm like, "Oh, I've gotten to this place." Like, "No, I've aged online." And then I went back to my photographer who I had worked with before, and it was awesome. Like, she had amazing makeup artist, but then she posed me, and it's like, even before the photos were edited, it's like, "No, darn it, I'm aging in power." Like, it
Mhm,
feels so different, I think especially for women of a certain age where it's
mhm.
not like, these lines on my face tell you, like, "No, no, I'm not giving up." At this particular age, I'm not giving up. I'm aging in power. It is what it is. And I
It's
think
like a
it's
good
important.
wine.
Yes. Like, I think it's important for anybody who's going through the whole process of solopreneurship and where they're the face and they're the brand, like that they want to have something where somebody can draw out their best representation. But I also feel like for those of us who are women who are mid career, like we're at a different phase in our life where it's like we still want to look like we are putting our best foot forward, and having a photographer who can dress you in the outfits that fit well for you and pose you.
Mhm,
Even when I look at the outfit you're wearing right now and all of that's behind you in your background, like this is totally your website. Like this
mm.
is you. And so when people get on your website, they're going to see this great version of you with your pictures, but it's you.
Yeah.
It's not like it's a different person. It's not like you had so much makeup and you're dressed in a way where it's like, yeah, it's a glamour shot and it's not congruent. It is congruent. You
Mhm.
have a headband on right now that in your necklace is just like your logo.
Mm,
It evokes your logo,
yeah.
and the pictures behind you evoke your color palette. So it's congruent.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, I want to go back to something I heard you say, Betsy, just about, women midlife, we've earned the wrinkles and the gray hair, but also, being at this wisdom stage, of
Uh-huh.
life, we have so much to give. and so much to also grow as well. And so it's just like for me, my 20s were great, 30s were all right, but being in my 50s, like this is where I really feel my power.
I think that that is an important thing too when it comes to consulting or coaching. If you think at the end of the day, a lot of times, or let me put it this way, like a lot of times I think consultants and coaches think that they sell like their methodology,
Mhm.
or a particular approach, but really at the end of the day, we do sell our lived wisdom. Like we are the mentors to these clients who are on this heroic journey. And what we're bringing is that wisdom. And I feel like I think this is where a lot of my passion for the websites come from, is to make sure that we are showing up as that person who has that lived wisdom that they can pass on to other people. And I think that a shoddy website doesn't convey wisdom. It doesn't
Yeah.
convey depth of experience. It doesn't convey depth of knowledge. It's just like, okay, here's my online resume. And you did
Mhm.
not get an online resume. You have a representation of like, no, this is an invitation. This is how I want to work with you.
Yeah. Exactly. And I also had the wisdom to know that I could not do it myself. I reached a point where, I did the self work. I did the work to kind of, dig into, okay, I know I'm heading in this direction, but I also knew I couldn't take myself to the next, level in terms of thinking about branding and positioning. And I also, could not do the website on my own either. I just did not have those skills and talents. And so the wisdom also came in knowing that, when to call in for some additional support on those.
Well, I am so glad you did. And I'm glad of all the options that you had in front of you, you chose me. But what were the other options that you were considering? Like when you were saying, all right, like what was the indication that I can't do this on my own? And what were the other things that you tried before you and I connected?
Well, I tried it on my own. And of a very dear, coaching buddy, was willing to help me put my website together. But it also didn't feel like, I didn't really know enough. Like I knew some, but I didn't know enough. And, certainly, to be able to translate, what I want to do and who I want to serve and how I want to present myself, being able to translate with someone who had done the work and had the experience doing it was important to me. So I wanted to be done well, and I wanted to be done right. um, I know that further down the road, there'll be changes and some, perhaps some different iterations. But for me right now, having starting off on a good foot and not feeling like, I don't know, um, was important to me as well.
So you tried it on your own. You had a coaching buddy help you. Is there anything else that you tried before you and I connected?
I had to call a millennial. uh, dial a millennial who has the experience in branding and social media, and so she was able to get me to a good place, but not being able to sort of take me to that next level. And, I've been listening to your podcast for a while and also, doing some of the exercises along with the podcast. And I said, let me check out Betsy. Because in terms of your values, I think there's alignment there. And, your work with mid-career professionals, definitely that was a plus. And, just knowing that you would be able to help me, kind of work through this middle place I was in, to be able to kind of being able to identify my brand and positioning and have a beautiful representation in the website.
So, some people might be saying, well, if you really needed something done, like, why don't you just use AI? You can just chat with Claude and Claude could help you and Claude could even design your website. Like, why did you need a human, like me to work it through? I appreciate all the nice things you said about me, but why is it you needed a human rather than, AI to help you?
Because AI, to me, I'm an educator. I have some real struggles around, AI. I do believe that it can be a really fantastic tool, but there is that human element to it that AI cannot give you. There is that reality check. I mean, most of the AI is set up to be a little more I would say, pandering, to the
Mhm.
user, a little more favorable than necessary. And you told me flat out, I don't think so. That's, you could go that way, but that's not going to work out well for you. And, to be able to have a human being who has the experience to tell you that, is so much more important. And also the human level of creativity as well,
Mhm.
is also needed. I mean, sure, AI can take you to different things. It can kind of, help you fill in some gaps here and there. But you still need to have the rooted knowledge and the insight and the understanding of the client on an emotional level that AI just cannot possibly provide anyone.
And even so, like, even if you have a design like now, I could spot AI designs, like, so fast. It's like, "Oh, no, Claude designed that." And it's like there's all these tells. Like, I
Mhm.
have a common template I use for my websites, like, in terms of the messaging, but the branding itself is all very different. And what you fill in the blanks, are all very different for every person. And I feel like that there's some of it is that if you see it like AI made your website, I think it diminishes your credibility because then it tells somebody like I didn't spend lot of time on this. Like I didn't really think this through, and here it is. Like a client showed me like, "Hey, what do you think of this website yesterday?" And it was like it was clearly an AI website for a law firm and all it said at the top for the hero is clarity and confidence. I'm like, "What does that have to do with a law firm?" Like, it doesn't even make sense, like, it's just there's a lot of things about it where it's like but if you don't know what you're looking for, then you can go forward, and I think the reason why I could say it is like, well, I know what I'm looking for. Like, I've been doing this for over 10 years, like, I've been in the field for 30, like, I
Mm.
know what to look for, and I feel like it's kind of like a jazz musician, like, you have to learn the scales, you have to learn the scales in order to divert from them, and so you have to, like, learn the principles like a master so that you know how to break them like an artist, and you wouldn't know that if you haven't had the experience, and I feel like you and I went faster than we normally would. My team normally would say, there's literally no way. Like, if I said, I don't know why my team, it was such an interesting process because I'm like, all right, I got this really special client. What can we do to pull this thing off in 30 days? Because she's got this event. And normally they would say it's like 8 weeks, like 8 weeks getting everything done with all the back and forth with the visual branding. They're like, I sense that she's great too. We'll do it. And so, as soon as you and I started working together, like I gave you all the decisions. And what's so interesting about you is you were calm for everything. Like I gave you a lot of things that we needed to get done. And in every task, you were like, I for those who are listening can't see me just putting my hand out like it's just flat line, like you were just calm, calm, calm through every single thing, and we were on an accelerated timeline. So I give you all the credit is because I think if you were all frazzled and got overwhelmed, like we wouldn't be able to pull it out, but you're like that. Is that you? Is that just who you are, or why were you so calm?
That's how I was born. That's just how I am. And I think, that's one of the things that really contributed to me being able to step into different leadership roles is really maintaining a sense of calm. There's a swirl going on, but there's a through line, in the midst of the swirl. And so I think, I just was able to approach it, okay, and I know what I need to get done and I'm gonna get it done. And, also the motivation was there too, like, I want to get it done.
Like, and you did it. Like, it's like, okay, you need to have a photographer. The next day, it's like, oh, the photographer's booked and it's in a couple days. And it's like, awesome. Like, and then you need to review this. Great. Then you just handled everything. And there was a lot that you handled. Can I borrow some of that calm? I think my daughter would greatly appreciate it if I could have some. Like, all the people in my life, like, "Can you just, like, give me an infusion? Like, I'll give you free branding stuff moving forward. Can I have an infusion of your calm?" I think it's a great attribute. I could see why that would make you a really great leader and a great consultant and coach because of that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And, especially, thinking about um, conflict resolution when you have different parties who are in conflict with one another, you don't want someone in that room who is all keyed up as well. You need to have someone to kind of, set a calm temperature in order to be able to discuss some really hard things. And so being able to sort of guide people through what feels very uncomfortable, very difficult, but, trying to instill that calm and that confidence to know that, okay, this doesn't feel good, but we're going to get through the other side and you let me know, how things are going. And so that definitely is a quality that I appreciate being, having you recognize that. But it's also a quality that I recognize that I have, people have told me, but it's something that definitely comes in handy, for leadership, but also facilitating and mediating and guiding some difficult conversations.
Is it something that you coach your clients to develop, or is that just something that you bring to the table that I can I can bring this, grounded presence and this calm presence to you, or is this something that's a learnable skill?
I believe it is a learnable skill. It hasn't quite come up yet in coaching in terms of someone wanting to have that kind of presence. But it certainly is something that can be cultivated and can be learned. I honestly believe that.
So there were a couple parts of the process that were difficult though. I mean, so we don't want to lie, make it seem like,
Yeah.
it was all smooth sailing. Like there was one part where you're like, I'm going to cry now cuz you're driving me crazy. And I don't know if you recall that moment. That is
I
one of
do.
them that were difficult. Can you talk a little bit about that part and what was it that you were facing and struggling with and what got you through to the other side? And is there something I need to do better to make you not wanna cry? You know?
I do remember that. Because I l l my training is as a literature professor, and I love words. I love the words that I put together, and I think there was a moment where you were like, "You had too many words." Like, and and, as a literature professor, like, words are my friends, like, I don't wanna leave a friend behind, and you're like, and just kinda started editing, and and that to me is like, "Oh my god," right? But I also knew and I
I killed
trusted
your babies.
you killed my babies, right? Like,
Oh, I murdered them without even having any empathy that I was murdering them.
like, I put together some phrases and some words and, and here comes Betsy just like, "No, no, too long, too many words," you know, it was just too much. And so I wanted to cry at that moment, because I had really invested a lot of thought and time in my words and, how I wanted to sort of phrase some things. And, here comes Betsy just hacking my words. And so, and I think that was just the moment where it's like, okay, I'm just gonna trust Betsy, I'm gonna trust her. And also just realizing that, this is part of the new identity as well, right?
Mhm.
That this is not an essay, this is not a book. This is really, me marketing, branding, positioning, identifying, who I'm working with, what I provide them. And so this is not an essay. And so it was really that realization that helped get me through. But it did hurt and I did want to cry. And I'm not a crier, but I felt some kind of way at that time.
I think it's also, like, facing, like, the scope of the learning curve.
Mhm.
Like, I feel like a lot of times, like, if I think I've used this analogy before, but it's like in I think it's like Rocky 2, where Rocky was, like, having to change the way he was fighting. So he's, like, normally he was a southpaw, and he wanted to learn how to fight, like, with his right hand. And so he had to, like, literally get his, like, left hand kinda, like, tied
Mm.
down, and in order to unlearn. And I feel like that's a lot of the times in the brand positioning and messaging is, like, the good messaging is not the same as academic writing, and it's not corporate speak, and it's not the third person kinda thing, and it's like it's a very different skill, and I feel like that's a lot of like, some of the wrestling match is getting to that clarity, like, getting through all of the words to get to the essence, and I think some of it is there's just an unlearning process that you have to go through.
Yeah.
You can't think like an academic, and I think it's like I use a lot of, like, fill in the blank prompts in a lot of the stuff I do, and, somebody asked me about it, and it made me really reflect on, like, "Well, why am I doing this?" And I realized, like, that's how I taught myself copywriting. That's how I taught myself messaging is I wasn't an academic, but I was definitely trained in corporate speak. I knew all the buzzwords and, how to synergize this and to your point that, like I had all the words. Like I had a game in my mind that I thought would be fun to like have it as part of my consulting and I called it lingo. Well, I put all the corporate lingo in a little
Mhm.
bingo game, so when you're bored in meetings, people could play lingo, like, kind of, like, sneak it with your friends. I'm like, "That would be a fun little thing to sneak in," if this is how much lingo people use. I was very fluent on all the lingo, and the only way I got out of it was to understand kind of, like, the structure of copy, and the structure of messaging, and I think this is where it's like it is such an unlearning process when I'm asking for questions on certain things like, "What's your expertise?" Like, we're not looking for a book, we're looking for a label. Because the book's not gonna help us get clarity, the label is.
Mhm.
And I think that's what I think some of it is I could be more sensitive. I apologize for, killing your babies. Um I will be more sensitive moving forward to not kill your babies, or if I am, I will just say, "I really love this baby, but this baby just needs to go in timeout over here." We'll just put her over here, and she's gonna be maybe future article,
Yeah.
future blog post. We'll save her for later. So I'll be more sensitive to that, and also be more explicit around, like, this is an unlearning process.
Mhm.
We have to like, everything that you know about academic writing, you have to put it all to the side. And that's part of the challenge.
Yeah, it definitely was an unlearning process, because we do tend to sort of expand and sort of, go off and come back, to the center again. And, this was a style of writing that was very crisp, clear, and to the point. And, it's like, it feels like there's something missing. And it really wasn't. But the idea is to kind of connect with your client and potential clients. And, you don't need to have all those words, right? Because you're really getting at the feeling and the emotion and not so much, all of the eloquent prose, that you could surround it with.
And then all the other explanations, like, I think a lot of times on our websites, we wanna teach our clients, like, we wanna
Mm.
inform them of, like, "This is what you're doing wrong. This is behind why you're having all these problems," and it's like, well, that's something that you're gonna say for your paid program.
Mm.
Like, you're not educating people on your website, you just wanna connect in with them so that they can book a call with you, but they're not gonna book a call with you by exposing like, oh, you don't need to tell them like, "Hey, it's your self-limiting beliefs that's getting in your way." Like, you don't need
Yep.
that in your copy. That's gonna show up later because that's not going to speak to where they're at. Like, they're not ready for that diagnosis yet. They're not there yet. We have to meet them where they're at. We have to meet them at their point of departure. So can you share a little bit about like what the true passion is and your concern? Well, all of helping leaders and academic leaders and people at midlife and resolving conflicts are all you're passionate about all
Mhm.
of it, but there's a
Right.
driving passion underneath a lot of what you do. Can you share about that and why it was hard to figure out like how to express it?
Yeah, I came into academic administration, really because of my commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And, one of my early roles was to work with academic departments in terms of expanding their candidate pools for hiring for positions. And that was the work I was committed to, did some great work there. But now that, fast forward to where we are in 2026, um, there has been this real chilling effect around talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion in higher education right now. And my concern was, well, it's true. That's what I'm committed to. That is what a number of my colleagues are also committed to, but also knowing full well that we can't talk about it without
Uh-huh.
really raising some red flags for some folks. And, although it is a cornerstone of many academic missions, it's something that we can no longer, expressly, explicitly talk about. And so I didn't want to, kind of raise a red flag. I also didn't want to cause any potential issues that colleagues who are at public institutions could possibly face if they wanted to work with me. And so the struggle or the challenge was really to kind of express the commitments that I want to have ultimately campus environments where everyone feels like they belong and where everyone can thrive. And I want to work with leaders who are committed to doing that. But it did take us a while to land on the right language that wouldn't, raise alarm bells and, kind of, create a controversy for people who wanted to work with me where, nothing's particularly controversial about wanting everyone to do well on their campuses and wanting everyone to thrive.
And that's like the hard thing too, because there is this mission, like, and you want to bring it forward, but it's like, how do you bring it forward in an environment, where, because you still want to attract the right people who share that value, who
Mhm.
want that, so that's the push pull. And I think you landed on it pretty well. Like how, like, I forgot what we had in the earlier draft of your website where we changed just one word and then
Mhm.
that was like what fixed it. Do you recall that? I don't recall it off the top of my head.
I don't recall it off the top of my head. I mean, it could have been any of the big 3, right? It could have been diversity, it could have been equity, it could have been inclusion, it could have been any of those. I think I did keep inclusive, in there because, everybody wants to belong. Everyone wants to kind of find their space, in the collage. I remember, sitting in on a workshop that was given by Beverly Tatum, who's the former president of Spelman College, and just talking about, there's a photo and, people look for themselves in the photo. And what
Uh-huh.
happens when you don't see yourself in that photo? And so I want to make sure that people see themselves, in the different photos, regardless of your background, regardless of who you are. Everyone wants to see themselves.
And especially like if you're talking about a campus, you're dealing with academic institutions in higher ed where there I imagine there's some degree of competition for students, and if you want to have more students who are from different backgrounds apply, you want to have a faculty that mirrors
Yes.
that. Like I think what makes me crazy about the whole DEI like anti backlash, is the business case didn't go away. The values didn't go away. Like what we want to have, like, just take the opposite. We want to create organizations where everybody looks the same, where people don't like nobody belongs, like nobody fits in, nobody feels included, and only certain people get perks and privileges over other people. Like, just take the opposite of it. Who wants that kind of organization? Nobody's going to put that on a mission statement and say, "Yay, we want that." We all want that. Like when I was at Disney, we called it rave. We wanted to create environments where everybody feels respected, appreciated, valued, we respect, appreciate, and value everyone. Like, that's why would that go away? But we did have to be smart about it. And I
Mhm.
think that we found the really good balance to stay true to the mission
Mhm.
without creating the flags that would be a barrier for whatever reason.
Right. Yeah, and I appreciate, you working with me and understanding, that particular challenge. I don't want to, have anyone who works with me be targeted, and I certainly don't want to be targeted, but I do want people who are committed to having, thriving campuses.
Especially in the leadership role, like, where you talked a lot about what it was like for you to be the first and only in the room for a long period of time. Like, that's a huge thing to carry, in terms or to have an experience, like a story that you have, and it's like a responsibility, like, I know what it's like to be the first and only, and now I wanna create opportunities where nobody says that they're the first and
Mm.
only. Maybe they're the first, but they're not the only.
Julie.
And now there's the other people are gonna be the seconds and the thirds and, like, we don't even
Mhm.
have to worry about that kinda number, but that part is a huge part of your story, so for me, that was an important part that we had to integrate, you know, into into your messaging. That couldn't that w that was not a word that I was going to murder, like, that part of the value, like, that was definitely gonna have to find a home.
Definitely, and I appreciate that, Betsy.
So, is there what else would you say as we are wrapping up that really helped you get this business that is the right one for you at the quality level that we got it to, in the speed that we got it to without relying overly relying on AI? Um, that I'm just like, I'm not asking you the right questions. Like, what else would you say is what got you to success? And is there anything else you would want to share with my audience of consultants and coaches just like you? About growing your own business, and I'm not asking you the right questions about that either.
I think, there's a couple of things that stand out to me. One is, um, and I think, in terms of working with you and also just thinking about, others who may be thinking about, doing their own businesses, it's just kind of like having that self-knowledge and self-awareness was really important to me. Like I knew I wanted to do this. I knew why I wanted to do it. And so, sharing that with you, you really kind of helped and pushed and coached me, through a process that uh, was really alien to me. I've been in higher ed, we sell classes, we sell education, but, certainly thinking about myself, as I am the business here. And so kind of pushing me and encouraging me in that way. And then, just thinking about other, midlife entrepreneurs or potential entrepreneurs or people who are thinking about it really is just doing it, right? Having that self-knowledge, but also the confidence to just do it. My word for this year was go. Right.
Uh,
And I feel like, now that we're at the mid-year point, right now, it's like, yeah, I have taken that word to heart. Just go and also just be open to the transformation and the learning and unlearning, that happens in the process. I realized that there were a lot of things that I had kind of, sort of, taken on, but they don't serve me very well in this, sort of new adventure and new identity that I'm taking on in my life at this point. And so leaving that behind, recognizing that it served me well at a moment in time, but moving forward, I have to sort of think and learn and grow differently. And I think, and I'm, really grateful to you, Betsy, for kind of pushing me along, particularly thinking about branding and positioning and, the beautiful website that I have.
well, thank you for the privilege and thank you for the challenge. I feel like what really made the whole engagement successful really was your beginner's mind, though. Like, so my take on the whole thing is that you came in with that word of go, and there was the commitment. You knew exactly why you wanted to have your own business. You knew you wanted to work with academia, even though the direction wasn't clear. But you were so great in terms of like you took a little bit of direction, and then you would go apply it. Even when it was difficult, you take a little direction, you apply it, take a little bit, and I think that's where the cadence was able to be what it was, It's because it wasn't a harried process. We were not rushed. It was, you need to make a decision on this, this, and this. You're like, "Got it. So here's the decision, here's the this, here's that." Then, when my team gave the visual branding options, you're like, you didn't overthink it. Like, I have some clients, like, they overthink every little thing, like, "Hey, can you scooch this thing over?" You just like, "Nope, this decision, move." And then when we worked on the copy, like, I think we had a couple different iterations that we had to go through to kinda get it tight, especially when it got into the environment, like, "Alright, we gotta streamlit." You're like, "Alright, well, I'll do that." And everything was like a learn, apply, learn, apply, learn, apply. So, I think that you created the conditions with your grounded presence and in your beginner's mind to really make the whole partnership as successful as it
Mhm.
was, and hopefully continues to be. So,
Thank you.
tell the audience again your URL and what they will find when they get there, and who they should be sending your way. What
Okay.
kind of clients should be sending your way?
Thank you, Betsy. So my website is www.dorothymosby.com. And that's DOROTHYMOSB as in baseball, Y. And, the clients I'm looking to serve are leaders in higher education. And leaders in higher education is a bit broad, so it's not just the deans and the provosts and the vice presidents, but it's also the department chairs, the directors, people who are occupying those positions. Those are also our leaders. And those are also the leaders who will be leading, the institutions in the future. And so those are the people that I really love to serve. And also academic departments, units, and teams that are working their way through conflict or just want to be able to manage conflict better and to be able to foster a sense of, if conflict comes, we're going to look at this friction as something that is productive and not as something destructive.
Can I add just a little bit to your messaging?
Sure.
So, we're looking to attract more academic leaders who are really striving to create the thriving, inclusive school environments where everybody belongs, and they are trying to do so in a time period of a lot of complexity, a lot of different unique challenges that they really didn't sign up for. So they were really great academics. They are now in this leadership role, and they're trying to do in a very complex environment. And so that's what's keeping them from achieving that goal. Does that help? But
That's
like,
it.
what do you think?
Thank you for Betsyifying it.
Okay. Just because a big part when people just, a little quick coaching moment, people ask you about what you do and who you want to attract. You want
Yeah,
to be articulate about who you help, but mostly the problem that you solve, which is the goal that they're after and what's in the way, so that you can help people who are listening to catch a picture of like, oh, they have that problem because it's too broad. Like you need your referral network and the people like who might be
yeah,
listening, they want to be able to say, "Oh, you're trying to deal with that. All right, I know who to send your way."
yeah.
All
Thank you,
right. So
Betsy.
thank you for letting me do a little coaching moment here. Um, so I've definitely for all of you who are listening, please check out her website. It's amazing. Love the visual branding so much. So Dorothy, as you could see on her background. And if you are interested in getting your website launched and a credible one and one that looks amazing and you want to get it done fast, and you have a beginner's mind, I'd love to help you. And if you need help getting clarity on what you do, the value what you do, and be able to create messages that connect you with the clients that you're meant to work with, I definitely love to help you out. Check out my website at www.betsyjordan.com. Don't forget Jordan is with a Y. And if you enjoy the show, please hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and rate and review on an Apple if you can. And until next time, thank you all so much for listening. And thank you so much, Dorothy, for being on the show. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you, Betsy.